Welcome to the Newborn Toolkit second webinar of the year. Welcome everyone. Please introduce yourself in the chat. Next slide, please. Welcome to the Implementation Learning Seminar Series. Welcome to our joint learning community. Our aim of this series is to encourage collaborative learning for faster progress together for small and sick newborn care. Our 2024 webinar series is structured around the WHO, UNICEF, 10 core components of small and sick newborn care. Today's topic is a very exciting topic. How to keep equipment out of the graveyard, implementation realities for maintenance of neonatal devices. We have fantastic news to share with you all. In 2023, the Newborn Toolkit had over 28,000 users from more than 170 countries. And it's all thanks to all the implementers worldwide who continuously input into this platform so that it stays a two-way educational knowledge platform for newborn care. So I'd like to say thank you, and let's keep the momentum going so that this platform can be the one-stop shop for implementers in newborn care worldwide. Please do join the Newborn Toolkit to hear about our webinars just like this one, our news, and to share tools and ideas for small and sick newborn care. On the screen at the moment, we have QR codes to sign up for a Newborn Toolkit newsletter in English, in French, and we also have a QR code for our social media channel. So we're on Facebook, on Twitter, and LinkedIn. So please do follow us on all our social media channels. Please do reach out to us on our website. We have a submission option where you can input into the website. And we look forward to collaborating further with you all in 2024. Next slide, please. So our host today for this webinar is Cara Palamountain. She's a research associate professor for Northwestern University Kellogg School Management and the technology qualification and innovation lead for NEST 360. Thank you so much, Cara, for joining us and for being our host today for this webinar.
Well, thank you, Mbozu. It's my privilege to be the MC for today's talk. We have a fabulous lineup of speakers and experts on this very important topic of how do we keep our equipment out of the graveyard? Next slide, please. So keeping the equipment out of the graveyard, we have this fabulous colored wheel that's spinning round and round, and we have this equipment and commodities component, a health system building block that we're going to be talking about and focusing on today. Specifically, how do we keep our equipment running and saving babies? Our neonatal devices running. So today we're going to be talking about that. We do also have some exciting upcoming events on March 19th. We're going to have a session on speaking up for newborns everywhere. There will be a French language implementation gap that we need to address specifically on this webinar. And on April 9th, we're going to have a special webinar on data and dashboards to drive quality improvement on our newborn wards. So welcome, everybody. Please introduce yourself in the chat. And if you do have any questions for the panelists throughout this discussion, please put them in the Q&A feature, not the chat feature. Okay, next slide.
D'accord, alors bonjour et bienvenue à le webinaire. Si tu veux écouter le webinaire en français, tu peux cliquer sur le lien qui est affiché en bas de l'écran sur Zoom et veuillez vous introduire dans le chat aussi. Merci.
Great. So as we talked about, the focus of this webinar is on keeping our neonatal devices out of the graveyard. And for any piece of medical equipment, I think it's important to first acknowledge that each piece of medical equipment has a life cycle. And in this field, we call it health technology management, or HTM. You might hear that throughout the webinar. But this cycle is really divided into 4 phases with the 9 topics that you see on this wheel. And so the first phase of really is associated with planning and assessment, making sure that we have the appropriate equipment in our environments. And then the second phase of planning is really on budget and finance, making sure that we have the budgets to then support the equipment throughout its life cycle. The second phase is really purchasing. What are we going to purchase? The technology assessment and selection, and then procuring, making sure a tender is written and a purchase can be completed easily. The third phase is really focused on installation and commissioning, installation of the devices, and training people how to use them and repair them and maintain them. And the focus of today's webinar really came on that maintenance and repair issue, the preventive planned maintenance. How do we take care of our devices once they're on the ward? So while that is the topic of today's webinar, that's really what we want to focus on. We also have to acknowledge that sometimes equipment does need to go into the graveyard, and it needs to be decommissioned and disposed of properly. So with that in mind, I'd like to move to the next slide. We're going to hear now on parts of this wheel from Millicent Allo. She's going to talk about device planning for survival, enabling routine preventive maintenance and biomed mentorship. Now, Millicent is a biomedical engineer. Next slide. She's the regional director of the biomedical engineering implementation for NEST 360. She serves as the Honorable Secretary General for the Association of Medical Engineering of Kenya, or AMAC, and as a member of the Global Clinical Engineering Alliance. She's a strategic advisory member of medical devices at WHO and a medical device policy review committee member at the Kenya Bureau of Standards. Millicent, it is my pleasure to pass the baton to you. Please help us decide how to keep the equipment out of the graveyard.
Thank you so much, Kara. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Millicent here, a biomedical engineer. I'm going to take us through the device planning for survival, enabling routine preventive maintenance and biomedical mentorship. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the reason as to why we are here today, we all need to ensure that our devices do not land in a place like this. As you can see, this is a medical device graveyard. There are quite a number of oxygen concentrators with a lot of dust. Some of them looks like they've been here for quite a number of years or months. And this is what we are all working towards, working against. We don't want to have our equipment landing in these particular graveyards. Next slide, please. So how do we ensure that our devices survive? How do we ensure that we enable the preventive maintenance? And how do we ensure that we capacity build the biomedical engineers to ensure that the medical devices are maintained? One of the things that comes to mind, as you can see, this is one particular slide that Kara had started with, the medical devices life cycle. This is something that each and every person working in a health sector is supposed to be aware of. How is the medical device life cycle looking like? And how and what exactly are we supposed to do to ensure that we maintain and we follow the right procedure that is recommended in this particular medical device life cycle, starting from the planning and assessment all the way to decommissioning and disposal. The number one thing that we need to ensure that we understand at the level of facility is the health technology management policies. There are policies that are related to this particular life cycle that we have talked about. The policies that are related to the assessment. How do the equipment land to our facilities? And one of the things that at times we overlook is not involving the biomedical engineers in the assessment and selection of the devices. If we all can be aware and create awareness on how the assessment of the devices are supposed to be done, how the maintenance is supposed to be done, all the way to disposal, and understand exactly what the health technology management policy are in our countries, various countries, and even in our various facilities, that would be very good. This is number one area to ensure that we understand what the medical device entails. The next thing that is also very important under the health technology management policy is investing in electronic medical equipment management system. This is something that will actually be able to help the biomedical engineers who are managing the devices to be able to understand what devices are available in use, what devices have been obsolete and are supposed to be taken out of use, and how are they supposed to dispose them. So then we don't end up having our devices in the graveyards when they are not supposed to be there. The next thing that we also need to understand is regulatory framework. Each country, each region has different regulatory framework, starting from the pre-service when the training is being done to the biomedical engineers, going all the way to the in-service when the maintenance of the devices is supposed to be done. We are supposed to understand what exactly is the regulatory framework of our countries. And one of the things that we really recommend is to ensure that we have the regulatory framework that supports the medical devices maintenance at all levels, that the biomedical engineers are the ones authorized to do the maintenance of medical equipment, and they are given voice to ensure that these devices are maintained appropriately as per the manufacturer's recommendation. The final thing under the health technology management strengthening the human resource for biomedical engineers. Again, we have seen the first slide having quite a lot of devices in the junkyard, the incubators, the suction machines, the oxygen concentrators. But sometimes we find this is happening because we do not have the right number of biomedical engineers at the facilities level. So for the policymakers and the people at the level of management and decision making, it is very, very vital to understand how many biomedical engineers are required per facility. How many devices do you have in terms of inventory? And so how many biomedical engineers do you need to have? In most cases, we realize that we have one biomed per facility, 2 biomed per facility running day and night. At times, it's very, very difficult to maintain this. And what we are trying to watch for here is to ensure that we have the right number of biomedical engineering team to be able to maintain these particular devices. Next slide, please. So again, going back to the topic, which was ensuring that our devices survive, ensuring that we do the equipment maintenance, and ensuring that we do the biomedical engineering capacity building. One thing to ensure that biomedical devices or medical equipment are maintained properly is to have a budget allocation. And so budgetary allocation is in different ways. Number one, that is most and very, very key is something that we normally refer to as ACS. That is the accessories, consumables, and spare parts. Along this particular slide, on the right side, you'll be able to see an Excel sheet with a list of spare parts of different warming, phototherapy units, and also the radiant warmers. So these are all the spare parts that this particular facility was able to list down for a given unit or a given equipment. So if all the biomedical engineers or if all the facilities are able to maintain the list of accessories, consumables, and spare parts that are required per devices that are there in their facilities, it is very easy, and it will make the work very easy to provide budgetary allocation for this particular purchase. Because a number of times you realize that we purchase the devices, but then you forget about the accessories, you forget about the consumables, and you forget about the spare parts that come later. So we only budget for the main device, but the accessories and consumables are not there. So this is one very important aspect. Number 2 is service kits for planned preventive maintenance. Again, we are really keying down on preventive maintenance because without the preventive maintenance, the devices will not be able to last. That is why we end up with the devices in the graveyard. So if we are able to have a budgetary allocation for the service kits for the planned preventive maintenance, then we are going to have our biomedical engineers able to take care of these devices in terms of planning their maintenance and even doing the corrective maintenance. The next thing is the biomedical engineering workshops. A number of times we realize that the biomedical engineers do not have an environment where they can easily or comfortably or to open up a device, clean it up, replace the part that is replaceable, and take it back and even calibrate it. This is not available. If we at the management level of the facilities or of the government are able to provide biomedical engineering workshops, then it will be very easy for the biomedical engineers to be able to maintain the devices. And of course, I've also talked about budgeting for the biomedical engineering staff. This is key and very important in the maintenance and ensuring that our devices do not end up in the medical equipment graveyards. The final thing under the budgetary allocation is the sustainability of donor supply devices. In most of the LMIC, we have quite a number of donor supply devices, but then we realize that these devices, number of times they end up in the graveyard because we are unable to sustain them. If we are able to budget and allocate a budget for the sustainability of these particular devices in terms of the accessories, in terms of the consumables, in terms of the service kits, and even in terms of the staff who are maintaining them, then we can be 100% sure that without the donors, after they've given us the devices, then we are able to maintain these particular devices in their absence. So this is one key area that will really support us and help us in keeping these medical devices out of the medical device graveyards. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. And then the final thing that we are talking about again is the biomedical engineering capacity building. So how do we build the capacity for biomedical engineers, ensuring that the biomedical engineers are trained on the devices that are supplied at the facilities level? If we can put this as a mandatory requirement at the facility level, then we are going towards ensuring that our devices do not land in the medical equipment graveyards. Promotion of the local innovations and manufacturing is also key in ensuring that the biomedical engineers are given enough capacity building to ensure that they are able to do their local innovations that they can be able to maintain, and also providing of tools of work. The picture alongside is very simple. Is a toolbox, one that was applied by Nest 360. This toolbox is a game changer when it comes to keeping the devices out of the medical equipment graveyards, because without this toolbox, the biomedical engineer is unable to do the planned preventive maintenance, is unable to do the corrective maintenance, and is unable to replace any part or even do the calibration. So provision of this toolbox is one of the best ways of ensuring that biomedical engineers are mentored and the capacity building is done in the right way. The next slide, please. Now, we're talking about having standard training when it comes to the capacity building of biomeds. Whenever there's a device that is applied in a facility or in a given country, it needs to be accompanied by standard training materials. The example shown here are the materials that Nest 360 has been able to develop for all the devices that they're actually giving out to the countries. And so we expect this same example to be emulated by different suppliers to be able to support the biomedical engineers and even the clinicians to know and understand the devices that they are having at the facilities level. With this kind of understanding, we will ensure that none of the devices end up in the graveyard, and we will maintain the devices and ensure that the preventive maintenance is also done in the right way, and the usage is also done in the right way. Next slide, please. Next. Yeah, looking at this, in the initial slides, we talked about the pre-service and in-service. This is an example of a skills lab that has been set up in the biomedical engineering training facility to be able to support the biomedical engineers to understand the devices that they are going to meet in the field when they transition to the in-service level. So this is very key when it comes to the pre-service. And it's very important because then the biomedical engineers will be able to interact with the devices before the actual work on the ground. And so this is one of the skills labs that has been set up by Nest 360 in one of the facilities. And there's quite a lot of improvement when it comes to the biomedical engineers coming out of these facilities, having learned a lot on the medical devices that they expect in the newborn unit. Next slide, please. And the next slide is talking about, next slide. Next slide is talking about an empowered biomedical engineer who is now capable of doing the planned preventive maintenance. This biomedical engineer has been given the service kits. This biomedical engineer has been given the toolbox. This biomedical engineer has been given enough capacity in terms of having other colleagues support. And this biomedical engineer has also been empowered to interact with other clinicians. And that's why we are able to see the biomedical engineer's number on the board, on the notice board of the clinician. So at any given time, they're actually able to call the biomed to come and do the planned preventive maintenance. And in this way, we are ensuring that everybody is integrated within the facility, that none of them will allow the medical device to fall into the medical equipment graveyards. With the empowered hospital and facility biomeds doing the PPM regularly and with only consulting whenever needed. Next slide, please. And so with those, they're just thoughts for action. One of the thoughts that is really coming in mind and a call for action is that we really need to strengthen and implement the health technology and management policies across the countries, and even at a lower level across the facilities. At the facility level, we should come up with a policy aligned to what the country is having to support the health technology management. The next thing that is also a call for action is to ensure that there's a lot of training that is provided to the biomedical engineers across board on all the devices that are supplied to them. And finally, we need to involve the hospital and national biomedical engineers in quality management of newborn care and other issues that are related to biomedical engineering and maintenance of medical equipment. And so with that, we'll be able to keep all the devices out of the medical equipment graveyards. Thank you so much. Over to you, Kara.
Great, thanks so much, Millicent. Terrific overview of the policies and the regulatory frameworks we need in place, but also some very practical advice on training materials, budgeting considerations for spare parts and consumables. Thank you so much for that. A quick reminder, please put any questions that you have for Millicent in the Q&A function of Zoom. And I see some already coming in. We're now going to switch over to talk about the government's role in device procurement and supporting biomedical technicians and engineers. And we're going to hear from George Banda from NEST 360. And George, next slide, is an engineering training and maintenance manager for NEST 360. And his interests include mentoring engineers and technicians to maintain newborn equipment, provide affordable newborn technologies, and sustainable technical education. So George, please tell us about the government's role in device procurement and supporting biomed technicians and engineers.
Thank you, Kara. And good morning, good afternoon to wherever you are. This is George Panda, working with NEST 360. And I'll be talking about the government's role in procurement and supporting medical technicians and engineers in the health technology management. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the government has a very huge role, especially in LMIC countries, considering that the government is the major provider of health services. For example, if for Malawi, that is about 63%. So to keep equipment available in all departments is no mean feat. So what role does the government play? So the government is responsible for putting in place standards and policies. So to ensure that there is high quality equipment that is also fit for purpose and value for money. Because the government now ensures that standards guidelines and procedures are followed in all the process of procurement. So the government is also responsible for planning. So planning for 63% of facilities is no mean feat. So the government has to do a needs assessment. So each and every purchase must meet a certain need. Yeah. So you can't just purchase and then you find that the equipment is staying idle. So it has to meet a certain demand. So the government has a system of keeping track of all the equipment that is there at the facilities. So when an equipment is going obsolete, the government will start planning for replacement. The same goes for decommissioning. And even if there is a sign of an increase in demand, so the government will start planning for adding more equipment. So that is the law of government in planning. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in the process of procurement, the government is also responsible for formulating specifications and requirements. So each and every country, they have some specific requirements that they need from an equipment, including the power, might be the environment in which the equipment is going to perform. The training requirements of the biomass in that country are different. So the government needs to set those specifications. And also they need to plan ahead in terms of supply of spare parts, consumables, because it is one thing to buy, it is also another thing to maintain that equipment in terms of supply of consumables and spare parts. So that has to be included in the requirement and specifications. And in low and middle-income countries, funding is a very huge challenge. Yeah, so the government has also a huge task in sourcing for funds for procurement. So the funds could come from internally or from donors and other well-wishers. So I think the majority of funds, they come from donors. So the government has also that huge responsibility. And the government also has a responsibility of identifying manufacturers and suppliers. So this is very important because you need equipment from a manufacturer who can guarantee trainings for your biomedical engineers, who can guarantee a constant supply of spares and to be there for after sales support, and those that can provide high quality equipment. So this is a huge task for the government as well. And then the certification of equipment. So before even any purchase is made, the government needs to certify that that equipment indeed meets the needs, the specification requirements for the country. So it's the duty of the government as well. And as we saw from the life cycle of procurement, the government is also responsible for activities to include the installation, has to make sure that the equipment is properly installed, commissioning for use, the trainings, the CPDs, and the maintenance throughout the life cycle of the machine. Next slide, please. Yeah. And moving on to supporting biomedical engineers and technicians who are out there in the facilities, making sure that equipment is available for our newborns. The government has also a very huge role. So what we can say here is that to keep a biomedical engineer that is at the site happy, excited, and committed to do the work of maintaining equipment, it's very simple. So these three here are the most basic things that you can keep a biomed committed. So one, you need to provide the biomed. They have skills possible for supporting in terms of training, continuous professional development opportunities, sending biomedical engineers to do trainings outside with the manufacturers as well. Also, if you provide spare parts for a biomed will be very happy. So in order for one to achieve their work, they need spare parts. And also procurement of tools, as Center alluded to, they need tools as well as testing equipment and PPE in order to be able to do their work. Next slide, please. Yeah, so to ensure that biomeds adhere to standards, and high level of quality, there needs to be supervision and the performance appraisals. So the government has a plan in its budget to do supervision and also performance appraisals. This also ensures that the morale of biomeds is very high and they're able to perform their work at the highest standards. The government is also has a very huge role in recruitment of biomedical engineers. Yeah, so the government has to keep track of the workforce at the facilities. If there's some facilities find that they're overwhelmed with work, so it's the duty of the government to ensure that the number of biomedical engineers, they match the number of work and equipment at each and every facility. And also the government is responsible for putting in place and revising policies that defines the path of biomedical engineers, because we need to retain biomedical engineers, and those aspiring biomedical engineers or upcoming biomedical engineers, they need to be assured that government out there will support them throughout their journey. So this is the duty of the government to assure those biomedical engineers through policies and standards as well. Yeah. So I think that's all from me on the government laws. Thank you. Over to you, Karen.
Wonderful job, George. I think you've really highlighted the importance of not only policy setting at the government level, but also management of those policies, and really reinforces a lot of the themes that Millicent was speaking about. Now we're going to hear about UNICEF's approach to planned and preventive maintenance. Next slide. I'm happy to welcome another biomedical engineer, Sarah Gati Mobaran, who's a newborn health innovation specialist at the UNICEF Supply Division and Product Innovation Center. Sarah, please tell us about UNICEF's approach to PPM.
Thanks so much, Kara. We can go to the next slide. Maybe. Perfect. Yeah, as Kara mentioned, my name is Sarah Gati Mobaran. I'm a biomedical engineer working as the Newborn Health Innovation Specialist at UNICEF Supply Division's Product Innovation Center. Next slide. So I thought, from UNICEF's perspective, it's helpful to start with a little bit of an overview of the scale that we talk about when we talk about UNICEF, because when we talk about preventive maintenance, it's something that, as we've noted from the past couple of presentations, it applies very holistically. So UNICEF itself operates in over 190 countries and territories, and we have various programs that we work in. You can move to the next slide. And specifically, the supply division part of UNICEF is the supply function that's responsible for supporting the programmatic work of UNICEF operations in all of these areas. And you guys can see here the warehouse that's responsible for supporting these different locations is actually the world's largest humanitarian warehouse. We can move to the next slide. And from this warehouse, more than $7 billion worth of goods and services have been organized or shipped out to support program countries just in 2022. If we move to the next slide, we can see also that UNICEF, again, just talking about scale, UNICEF transported more than 140 million metric tons of supplies, and that's just in 2023. So huge scale we're talking about here, lots of different moving elements, lots of different parts. But if we do a bit of a deeper dive into those numbers, we can move to the next slide. The overall scope of what UNICEF Supply distributes is huge. So it's anywhere from what you can see here, so vaccines, to medical and cold chain equipment, to educational supplies. And with this huge scope of work, it can be very difficult to dial down into just one aspect of the sustainability ecosystem. Next slide. But that's what we're here to do. So we're going to dial into medical supplies and equipment, and we can go to the next slide. And more specifically, UNICEF's approach to planned preventive maintenance, or PPM. Next slide. So within UNICEF Supply Division, especially within the Product Innovation Center, we focus on three main areas. So ensuring that we have durable medical equipment, effective service contracts and guided procurement. And that includes things like maintenance kits and essential tools. Next slide. So I'll do a deep dive into each of these. So in the Product Innovation Center, where we work on product innovation at UNICEF's Supply Division, we work to really increase accessibility to products that are sustainable. So that means reusable, accessible, consumables and spares, robust, low cost, and human factors oriented in design. So the products that we bring in should be able to function even if preventive maintenance is inconsistent. Now, we know that's not the answer to long-term sustainability and maintenance for these products, but as we bring in new products, we're also working with manufacturers and suppliers to build out instructions and educational resources for preventive maintenance. We're also developing templates that can be provided to our country offices to build out service contracts for biomedical engineering and maintenance services. So in each country, people can really get the support that they need, even if they don't necessarily have a biomedical engineer on staff ready to support them. And all of this is sort of building towards the overall life cycle for this equipment. You guys saw the health technology management life cycle that we focused on earlier. We really need to support this equipment longer term. And that's the point of preventive maintenance, is to make sure that it has the longest lifetime possible. Next slide. So in line with that, when we're developing innovative tools that are meant to aid or to guide procurement, like the procurement guide that you can see here, we integrate spares for both preventive and corrective maintenance. So this is an example of one such tool. So if you double click on any of these items, it will give you estimates for consumables and for spare parts that you might need for your specific piece of equipment. Next slide. We also work to access to maintenance kits that can be used to bulk procure spares, as well as equipment essential for maintenance to simplify the process of procurement and embed preventive maintenance in every stage of the supply process. You can move to the next slide. In trying to do that, we've made available tools for maintenance. So you can see here an example of that with a phototherapy or radiance light meter. We know that this is an essential tool to be able to provide preventive maintenance in newborn care units. So we make it as accessible to our country offices as possible. Next slide. So we've mentioned also that preventive maintenance, it's not something that exists in a vacuum. It's something that really applies to the rest of the supply, engineering, and health ecosystem in a country. So UNICEF is also working to build up these ecosystems in a few different ways. So this example on the slide here is actually a UNICEF supply chain maturity model, which is a framework to qualitatively assess critical operational and technical supply chain functions. So this can include anything from strategy and policy to infrastructure and equipment to information management. So to make sure that we can really get all of the tools that are necessary to support a supply chain in providing long-term support of medical equipment and beyond. Next slide. We're also working in the Product Innovation Center to try and address the engineering and health ecosystem around preventive maintenance more directly. And this includes working on a framework and initial projects around the development of centers of excellence in health technology management. So you can see here all of the things that we've mentioned in the slides thus far, things like process excellence, CMMSs, corrective maintenance, those kinds of things are all integrated into this model. Next slide. So I'll bring you back to this picture of our beautiful warehouse. And I want to sort of end with a question for you. So we realize as UNICEF and as Supply Division that there's so much that's needed in this area. There's a lot that we can do. There's a lot that we can improve. And even though after COVID, I think people have begun to realize the value that biomedical engineers can bring and the value that maintenance can bring, whether that's preventive or corrective to a hospital or to the health system, there's still a lot that needs to be done to build awareness about what that means and to really build awareness about the investment that needs to happen in things like building out service contracts when there's already so much demand for funds on a systems level. So we know it's complicated already to get money just to support your newborn care unit. It's even more complicated to try and advocate for building out a fund that's available longer term for things like preventive maintenance or for corrective maintenance. So we're trying right now to help build out this advocacy for biomedical engineers, for country offices, for other stakeholders to use to really say, yes, we've allocated this much funding for equipment, but we need to also allocate this much funding for spare parts, this much for training, this much for service. And while we know as supply division, we don't necessarily have the capacity to be on the ground doing the preventive maintenance, changing the filters ourselves, but we can build into the systems that are already in place to try and help support service providers to be the best equipped to take care of these medical devices. We know there's progress that needs to happen. We've heard from 2 other groups today, and all of us, I think, realize how much work still needs to happen in this space. So we're looking for you, all 91 people that are attending this call, to really help provide us with guidance and how we can help support as you guys try and work through preventive maintenance processes. And so I'll leave you guys with that thought. I know we'll come back to this at the end of the session with the Q&A, but it would be great to see you post in the Q&A or in the chat with any thoughts that you might have as we continue through this webinar. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was a wonderful highlight of the scale that UNICEF operates in, both at a country level as well as the types of commodities and medical equipment. And also, I love your question about how can we improve PPM together, everyone on this call. We're now going to shift to Marvin Nandwa, who's going to provide a talk on why do you go to the newborn ward to check on devices? A very pragmatic question to ask for this call. Checking on the devices is important so that we can keep our newborns alive. Now, a little bit about Marvin, next slide. He's a senior medical engineering technologist based in Kakamega, which is the western part of Kenya. And he coordinates medical engineering services at the Kakamega County Referral Hospital and the larger Kakamega County. So please, we're going to hear a video from Marvin. Thank you for joining.
Yes, my name's Marvin Nandwa, a biomedical engineer working in at Kakamega County Referral Hospital, this western part of Kenya. I'm here just to speak about why I really have that passion and what drives me towards supporting newborn units in terms of technical support. And I can gladly state that I have a lot of passion towards newborn units. This one area that I've been trained on the neonatal devices, and I really enjoyed seeing my neonatal devices in the hospital on up and running, functional, and in good working condition. Why I say so is that in many cases I consider these young babies, the preterms, these are babies that are so much innocent. They might not even be aware of what is happening. They might not be seeing the situation they are in themselves. So just having this equipment working, just having this equipment well maintained, it gives me a lot of content. I feel so much glad at giving a life to these young babies. And I can say so because in many occasions, we realize the babies might be born before they are full term. That is, probably they might be underweight, they are not at full term. Some might even have some other medical conditions, say hypothermia, say respiratory distress syndrome. You can equally say even jaundice. So just having the devices in the units up and running is quite, it technically gives a life to these young or newborn babies. So to me, moving in the units, checking on my my equipment, the incubators, the resuscitators, the phototherapy machines, and ensuring they're up and running. At the end of the day, this baby coming out gaining the required weight, this baby coming out medically managed and going home, it gives me a lot of content. Seeing that smile in the face of their mothers, their fathers, and them now feeling their baby is okay, they are going home, gives me a lot of content, because at the end of the day, I feel this baby also deserves a chance, like any other baby that has been born at full term, to have a life. So to me, this is what drives me towards the unit. This is what drives me in supporting the unit. This is what drives me in ensuring the devices are okay. This is what drives me in ensuring the devices are well maintained. This is what drives me just to ensure everything is okay in the unit and the machines are up and running. And on a daily basis, once I report the hospital, I have just to visit the units and ensure everything is okay, everything is set up, the devices are okay, the neonatal nurse is okay with all the devices. It gives me a lot of content. So in a nutshell, that smile to the face of their parents when they're being discharged home gives me a lot of content. And that's what drives me on each and single day once I report on duty to ensure the devices are okay. Every minute I receive a call, I give it first priority, the newborn unit, just to ensure the devices are okay and the babies in there are safe and they are able to be managed by the clinicians well. Thank you.
Beautiful. And Kakamega County is so lucky to have Marvin looking after the neonatal devices and the neonates both. We've had a wonderful set of talks, and we've also had a lot of folks post some thoughtful questions in the Q&A. We're going to start tackling some of those right now. The first question is from Patricia. She asked, how can government better manage devices when many devices are donations? I'm wondering if George or Millicent can potentially tackle that question. The question is around donations. How do we manage donations of equipment? Maybe some donations that are well-intentioned, but maybe not warranted.
Okay, thank you, Kara. I can go, probably George can add. And so if the government is having a number of devices, most of their devices as donations, and they're finding it hard to manage, the first thing probably that we need to consider is getting it right from the beginning. Like the time we are getting the donation, we need to agree, are we getting the equipment going to be in use for some time, or are we getting end of life this? Because as a government, to accept devices that probably having 6 months or 1 year to end of life, you're supposed to have a device donated to you that is still having a number of years of lifetime, say 3 to 5 years thereabout. That is something worth considering. And maybe another thing to consider is, are the spare parts available? If not available, spare parts, accessories, and consumables. If not available, then you will not be able to maintain those devices. So I think the government is supposed to put in policies, donation policy, to guide what kind of devices they accept at the government level. This will be able to support them in which people are supposed to donate and what equipment they are accepting in their various facilities. Thank you. I don't know whether George has something to add. Thank you.
Great. Also, just a reminder to our panelists, please answer in the Q&A. You can also type your responses if you see a question you wanna bite on. George, please.
I think Millicent has exhausted everything.
Okay, great. We'll move on to the next question. This one is for Sarah. There's a question from Nina regarding the UNICEF's approach with the Ministry of Health regarding sort of medical device lists. Can you speak to how involved you get in medical device lists with ministries?
Yeah, this is a great question, and we're lucky to have on this call actually quite a few maternal and newborn health specialists from our country offices, and they're really the experts that work with ministries of health to ensure that these essential medical supplies lists are updated with appropriate medical equipment and all other needed supplies and commodities. So I'll bow to their greater knowledge of that, but we perform a support function for those staff. So if there's specific specifications that they need for devices or advice on comprehensive supply lists, then we can provide that as well. But then our country office staff are the ones that really take the full brunt of the work in trying to work with ministries of health to ensure that the right products are ordered.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. We've had a couple of questions on the ECMMS system that Millicent mentioned at the top of her talk. Millicent, can you speak in a little bit more detail about what those are and how people can get access to them?
Yeah, thank you, Kara. And I like the questions about the ECMMS, that is the equipment computerized management system. Yeah, so one of the things that we need to consider when getting this electronic management system for our devices is the inventory capacity. How much or how many equipment is a facility having at any given time? And then it depends on what exactly you want to really do with this particular system. There are those ones that are capable of helping you to track your planned preventive maintenance. There are those ones that will only be able to help you tracking your inventory. And there are those ones that can also be able to help you in tracking, the corrective maintenance. So it is the biomedical engineer to define the specification of the kind of the computerized system that they need. So on the availability, currently, globally, we do not have a platform for all the electronic medical devices right now, but I know this work on the background to have that available through WHO. However, we have quite a number of suppliers of this electronic computerized management system for the medical devices. And for those who are asking, how do I get them? I think getting them through getting them through the Ministry of Health Procurement Division, if they're able to. Some of them are even connected to our hospital information management system. So with that, and we also have some of the suppliers that are having, like I know we have Asset Infinity that is supplied by Hatch Technologies. We have different, they're really quite a number. It only depends on what a biomed needs to. Whenever you just go to search the available ECMMs in different platforms, you'll be able to find quite a number. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Millicent. We also have a question. I'm gonna throw this one to Marvin. There's some questions about how biomedical engineering technicians can get toolboxes and also access to capacity building and mentoring. I don't know, Marvin, if you have a specific set of tools that you like to use or resources for capacity building and mentoring that you could share.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kara. Indeed, biomedical engineers in the health facilities need a standard set of tools to use. And these might vary according to the specific works that they are to undertake, which might include general maintenance of the equipment, might include servicing, and also calibration. So this will vary according to the specific functionality that is needed by the biomedical engineers. And also the aspect of capacity building, which is quite great because technology actually is improving day in, day out. And it's important for the biomedical engineers across the facilities to undergo capacity building from time to time. And this can be obtained through periodic trainings and webinars, and also to engage some of those suppliers and the companies that are producing latest technology and equipment. So they can be able also to offer such like training and capacity building to biomedical engineers. And also just to put across It's also important, probably once a hospital is buying some of this capital equipment, to engage the companies that is delivering the equipment to undertake technical training for the biomedical engineers so that they are able to equip themselves with the latest technology to maintain that equipment. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Marvin. That's terrific. I'm wondering if we need some sort of standardized list of tools that a neonatal device or newborn ward would need for our biomed technicians. I saw Sarah LM referenced a couple of those in her talk, but it would be nice to have sort of a one list that we can provide, which would be nice. Okay, we have a few minutes left in our webinar. Wanted to shift a little bit. If we could maybe go to the next slide, and want to let you know about the different resources and tools that we already have for each part of this medical equipment life cycle. These are all accessible in the newborn toolkit at the website below. There's some papers on, I know I saw a lot of comments on budgeting and financing in the chat, and how do we do cost out what we need for devices. So that's one area that there are resources and tools available. I think we need to get better about planning for the total life cycle of the device as well. We do have some guidance on procurement and logistics and what types of equipment is rigorous and effective and affordable and easy to use in this toolkit. We also have a lot of resources on how to do preventive and PPM. And in the Nest Ed tech scenarios, there's not only tools and guidance on neonatal devices and how to install each one, but also how to train people how to do that preventive maintenance. And there's lots of different formats and videos as well. Finally, there's also lots of policy documents on safe use of medical devices and decommissioning medical devices, really a proper graveyard for some of our medical devices that WHO has put out. But I think what this webinar has started to dive into is that we need to move and all the content that is provided in these resources and tools to the actual wards, and making sure that the content is translated to actual the type of care and support that Marvin provides in Kakamega County. So I would like to just thank all of you for joining today's session. A quick, for those that might want to access the toolkit or some of the papers referenced here, you can use this QR code or the website directly. We have 10 papers, 3 of which are focused on this biomed engineering component. Next slide. Finally, I want to just again highlight on March 19th, we're going to be speaking up for newborns everywhere, using and having a discussion on the French language and the implementation gap and getting the word out for newborns in French-speaking countries. Also on April 9th, we're going to have another webinar on data and dashboards to drive quality improvement on newborn wards. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're interested in this type of content and keeping posted on upcoming webinars, please sign up for our newsletter, which is available in English and/or French. And you can also visit and contribute to the Newborn Toolkit. Maybe you have some resources that you think could be really helpful for some of the questions answered today. But let's take this all as an opportunity, as the 100+ participants on this call, to continue to not only provide accessibility to resources available for PPM, but also translating those resources into the newborn wards. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to all of our panelists for wonderful expertise and knowledge and knowledge sharing. And thank you for all the people that had great questions. Have a good day.